I have recently been working on a project which involves cutting up literally hundreds of coffee stirrers. So far I've done it individually, but there's got to be a better way. So in this video I'm going to show you what's in the box. Greetings fellow earthlings, welcome back to Darlingbrough Sci-Fi Builds. I have recently been working on a new project behind the scenes, which I will be revealing in an upcoming video. Whilst working on this project, it made me realise that if I bought a new tool, I could dramatically improve efficiency. Well, that's my excuse anyway for buying a new toy. So not to keep you in suspense for any longer, the tool that I've ordered is a mini table saw, suitable for hobbyists and small DIY applications. The one I bought in particular was bought from eBay and I paid just over £20 for it. I must admit, upon opening the box, my first reaction is one of pleasant surprise. I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting anywhere near the amount of accessories or additional components that came with the saw. My opinion was that I was just getting a small table saw. So initial thoughts are, I'm actually quite impressed with the package that I've received. For example, I certainly didn't expect a rotary tool attachment to come with it, nor did I expect any parts to come to turn it into a disc sander either. Considering the price that I paid, it was actually rather surprising to get a lot more than I was expecting. However, it does make me wonder if all of the accessories and the extras that come with the saw is at the detriment to the actual quality of the saw itself. The first thing I noticed is that the instructions come on a trifold brochure, with literally brochure, trifold brochure written on the front. It's almost as if somebody has taken a template and forgot to change the title. Never mind, let's look at this trifold brochure. Hang on a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. Forgive me, hang on, I need to check something. What is a trifold brochure? A trifold brochure is a single sheet of paper that is folded twice to create 6 equal sized rectangular panels. Okay, so the fact that the trifold brochure, that literally says trifold brochure, is not actually a trifold brochure. Now I'm not sure whether that's an indication of the kind of quality that I'm due to expect for the product itself. But let's overlook it, shall we? So let's take a look at the accessories that have come with the saw. And boy, there sure is a lot of them. The first thing I noticed when opening the bag was that there was a rotary tool, flexible shaft attachment. One I recognised instantly, as I already had one for my rotary tool. Now if I'm honest, I've already got one, which didn't seem to work very effectively. I thought it would certainly be interesting to compare the new one to the one I already had, to see if there was any difference in the build quality. As well as the flexible rotary tool attachment, the package also included a large amount of accessories to use with the rotary tool. These included sanding discs, small cutting discs, and other really useful accessories. Now I must admit, if I was to buy these as a separate item, it would probably cost in around about the same price that I paid for the saw and all of the accessories as well. Bargain. As well as providing sanding tools for the rotary tool attachment, the saw also came with a built-in disc sander and polisher with several different accessories which can be attached using a hook and loop, aka Velcro, attaching system. The last bag that I was really interested in is this one here, which, as well as having a bunch of sanding discs and grinding discs for the actual disc sander, it has got the saw blade, which is the main reason I bought this item. Now, it'd be interesting to know if I could use these grinding discs with the centre saw or not, or whether this is only for... oh wow, I wasn't expecting that. As well as having a small toothed saw, which I presume is for light materials like balsa or something. I've got what appears to be quite a heavy duty saw as well, which should be interesting for slightly thicker, more heavier materials. There's also a bunch of sanding discs, various grits from 80, 120, 240, which is really pretty fine, 400 and 600 as well. So again, I'm pretty impressed with the range. Now, it's all just Velcro on the back, so that it means it's so much quicker and easier to attach to the disc sander, which I like as an idea. How effective it is, we'll find out. And then last of all is obviously the chucks, presuming that's for the sanding disc. And the rotary tool as well. Some of Allen keys. A small bag full of parts for the actual saw itself, and a bunch of small tools such as Allen keys, and a small screwdriver was also included to help you with assembly. Included in the box was also a power adapter as well, which interestingly had the ability to change the output voltage using a small switch. I quickly discovered that this was a workaround to controlling the speed of the saw. Interesting way of doing it, I suppose. It was then time to start assembling the saw, which I must admit I found fairly intuitive. Considering the instructions were on a trifold brochure, they were fairly clear. Not that I really paid much attention to them. Now, one thing I will recommend when you come to attach the blade and all of the other devices, to take the lid off the top. It's not actually in the instructions, but I did find it a lot easier than trying to go through the side and the panels on the sides, as the instructions would lead you to do it. Once the saw blade had been installed, it was then time to install the sanding disc. Again, this was fairly simple. All I needed to do was attach the chuck bit to the protruding axle and screw it into place using the Allen key. It was then just a simple case of installing the actual sanding disc itself using a chuck key, similar to using a drill. It was then time for the first test of the saw. Ooh, yeah, I kind of need to sort that out. Must admit, it wasn't the easiest thing to tighten up. I struggled for a few minutes, because every time I tried to tighten the disc sander, all that was happening was I was rotating the motor. However, with the use of the Allen key and some perseverance, I eventually got it, and voila, everything looks good. All that was left to do before I put the lid back on the saw was to install the rotary tool. Again, this had a small adapter which bolted on to the axle of the motor. Now, one of the things I did realise as I was putting it together is that when you power it on, it's one motor which controls all three of the attachments. So the saw, the sanding disc, and of course the rotary tool. And when it came to attaching the rotary tool, I didn't actually connect it. The reason being is that A, I've got a rotary tool already, which I tend to use, and B, I just didn't like the idea of this being on all the time while I was using the saw. With the sanding disc, I feel that's going to be on the other side and away from where I'm going to be cutting, so I feel that that's a little bit safer. However, I think it would be nice if the design allowed you to turn each of the items on individually rather than one switch for all. Once I had replaced the lid, it was then time to insert the mitre gauge used for cross cuts. One of the first things I noticed when I installed it was how very loose it was. Understandably, you want the mitre gauge to be able to move freely back and forth, so you can move your material through the saw blade. Normally, a good mitre gauge would have a fairly tight tolerance. However, this was not fairly tight tolerances. To further exacerbate things, when I installed the fence using the two bolts and wing nuts, I soon realised that it was going to be very difficult to keep the fence aligned with the saw blade. It was at this stage I seriously considered how accurate this saw was actually going to be. One of the issues I had was when I went to attach the clear acrylic shield onto the top of the fence. I didn't realise at the time when I installed the fence that it was upside down and I had to turn it round. And again, without reading the instructions, I tried to just attach it straight to the fence without realising that there was an extension piece. But again, that was down to my own naivety and my own stupidity for not reading the instructions. It was clearly on there. All that was left was a couple of sticky pads to attach to the feet, and we're good to go. So now that I've assembled it, and it's actually quite bulky, it's quite fairly solid, let's see how it works. So as I've already mentioned, I've actually been working on a project where I have needed to cut multiple coffee stirrers to size. The reason I actually bought this saw was to try and speed up the production process. So I felt that the first test should be a small pile of coffee stirrers. I wrapped some masking tape around them to hold them together and then fed them into the blade of my saw. I'm sure that the saw screaming in pain is normal. Right? Not only was my table saw pleading for its life, it even started to fight back. Kick back. The table saw itself doesn't have any kind of riving knife at the back of the blade. Now what that means is that when you cut through, the blade spinning can actually send that piece of cut wood flying back at you. And this is called kickback. And on a normal table saw, you normally have a straight blade behind this spinning blade to prevent that. However, this simply doesn't have it. In addition, as I was using this saw, the vibrations from the saw actually caused the sanding disc itself to vibrate and fall off. Now I have tried to tighten it up, but unfortunately as I keep tightening the little screw at the end, it just spins, and eventually this bit fell off as well. So because of that, I must admit I was actually put off completely using the sanding disc at all. So I'll be honest, I've not even tried this part of the tool whatsoever. So now that 2/3 of this multi-purpose tool has decided to prove that they are useless, it's time to open up and see what this baby can really do. I moved away from the coffee stirrers and turned my attention to ripping some real wood. In this case, some 3mm plywood. Yeah, that doesn't sound healthy. As I was pushing the strips of wood through the saw, I must admit I was very aware of how close to the blade my fingers were getting. The fact that the saw was vibrating like mad really didn't help, and I was suddenly getting a little bit more nervous. After I had finished ripping the strips of wood, it was then time to see how effective the mitre gauge was at doing crosscuts. Yeah, not much better to be honest. I must admit I tried it with the beefier blade and I found that that was a lot better at cutting through slightly thicker material. So I've been using the table saw for most of the day, having a play, and I've come to a bit of a conclusion really. It's not perfect, and I must admit that I've noticed quite a few things that have really put me off it a little bit. But before I give you my full-on verdict, I'm just going to go through some of the good points and some of the not so good points that I've discovered whilst using this tool. A couple of things I did notice is that the mitre gauge is woefully inadequate. I don't trust that it would provide an accurate 90-degree cut if that's what I was going for. As an attempt to rectify the issue, I've actually stuck some blue tape on the back of it just to try and tighten up a little bit, but even that doesn't really help. Adding to the issues with the measurements, the fence is incredibly difficult to align properly as well. The fact that you have to adjust 2 wing nuts, one on each end, means that it's possible that your blade and your fence are not going to be completely aligned. Also, I did notice that when I aligned one end and tightened up the wing nut, it would slightly move, again adding to the inaccuracies. Now obviously if you are looking to produce cuts that are near enough, yeah, that'd be fine. But if you are looking for millimetre accurate cuts, then yeah, you're going to have a serious issue trying to get anything straight, cut, level, or on the length that you need without some serious amount of focus. Speaking of tolerances being completely out, I noticed that the measurements printed on the top of the saw are actually completely out as well. Normally the 0mm should be directly in line with the blade, but as you can see here, it's 2 or 3mm out completely, which means that if you are measuring stuff using the measurements on the top of the saw, then you're going to be out several millimeters every single time. Now as I mentioned, I did swap the blades over as I was playing around, but one of the things I found was that it wasn't very easy unless you literally took the top of the saw completely off. Now according to the instructions, you're supposed to use the little hole in the side to remove and replace the blade, but having tried that, it was incredibly fiddly, and I found that just unscrewing the lid made it a lot easier. However, if you do compare the work that's involved to swap the blade out on this compared to a full-size table saw, you'll probably find that about the same amount of effort is required. So whether that's an issue or not for this particular saw, I wouldn't like to comment. The last thing I should mention is a serious concern about the actual blade itself. During the day I did have a look at some other reviews of very similar saws, and a lot of them said that the blade height was actually fixed in place. However, when I read the instructions, I was surprised to find that there is actually a screw that you can turn to raise and lower the blade. So obviously this seems to be a slightly more modern version of the saws that other people have. However, I did notice that the blade itself appears to be quite loose. Now I don't know if this is damaged, whether I've broken it, or whether this is a flawed design. But I have noticed that when the blade is going round, when it meets any kind of serious resistance, the blade tends to jump up slightly, which obviously is quite dangerous. On top of that, I should also reiterate the fact that there's no speed controller on the saw itself. You have to use a clunky switch on the power supply. There's no way of isolating each individual tool. The sanding disc fell off as I was using it, and there's no riving knife on the saw, which means that there's not really a lot going for this saw. So with all of that said and done, is there anything positive I can say about the saw? Well, it's cheap, I suppose. I have actually seen the saw available in a wide variety of prices, ranging from around about £25 upwards to around about 50 or 60. Although, I'll be honest, I wouldn't pay any more than around about £25–30 for it. The saw also has excellent availability, and you can purchase it from a wide variety of stores, such as eBay, Temu, Amazon, so you can find it pretty much just about anywhere. It also does seem to be a fairly good bargain, at least on paper. Not only are you getting the saw, you're getting the sanding disc and the rotary tool as well. I must admit that I'm also really impressed with the sheer amount of accessories that actually came in the package. Although I didn't use the rotary tool part of the actual kit, these will go perfectly with the rotary tool that I already use. Now when I bought this saw, I really wanted to like it. I felt that it was going to be absolutely perfect for the project I had in mind. And that's because I'm working on a project where I need to cut lots of coffee stirrers and 3mm ply sheets. And I feel that this saw will probably do the job. However, I certainly wouldn't recommend it for anything more industrial. Now obviously all of this is purely my own opinion. If you've got one of these saws yourself and you've had a different response to it, perhaps you've had better luck than I have, then please get in touch. Leave any feedback in the comments down below and let me know how you got on, because I'd be very interested to hear other people's opinion. So if this review has helped you in any way, then please let me know by hitting the like button. Also make sure that you subscribe to the channel as well, so you don't miss any future videos that I release, including one where I talk about the project that I use the saw for. Until that video is released, then check out these videos here. Have a good time. Hasta la vista. I'll be back.